If you wait to do everything until you're sure it's right, you'll probably never do much of anything. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We are just 4 weeks away, less than 4 weeks away for the D-Day, the presidential election 2019, to elect the 7th executive president of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. To discuss about the election and the run-up to the polls, we've invited 3 guests to our studios this evening, including 2 independent presidential candidates. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us tonight on the show is Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, independent presidential candidate. Also joining us this evening on the show is Dr. Ajanta Pereira, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka, and also Krishmal Varnasuri, attorney at law, legal counsel of presidential candidate Mahesh Seranayake, contesting under the National People's Movement. Nice to have the 3 of you on board today on the show. Let's start off tonight's show with Dr. Ajanta Pereira, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka. Dr. Pereira, let's talk about policies. Let's talk about what your party and you as an individual bring to the table as far as the presidential election 2019 is concerned. We have 4 main candidates, that is Sajith Premadasa, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Anurkumar Dissanayake, and also Mahesh Seranayake, and then you have the likes of independent candidates like Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, so on and so forth. Tell us, why is your candidature different than the others?
Okay, number 1 is that I am a woman. So I am the only woman who's actually stood up for the presidency. And I believe that also included in it is the fact that I have a lot of experience in working in different issues in Sri Lanka. And that I have not only an educational background, but I also have the qualifications from international arena. And then also, I have I have worked among the poorest of the poor in Sri Lanka. I've done a lot of social work, and I have been also doing a lot of voluntary work. Many of the people who actually come to politics, they look at the money, the facilities and various other things. But I have done my work already in Sri Lanka for 26 years as a voluntary worker, and I have actually developed I have done so much work that today everyone in Sri Lanka knows what environmental protection is. And I have been working on the garbage issue. I have actually told the nation exactly how to solve the garbage problem, but it's a sad thing that the people who have actually been in charge have not done it. And then last of all, I come back to the fact that I am a woman. Why is a woman so important? A woman is the mother of a family. And she always has a vision for her family. And she has a lot of determination. And she always puts the rest of the family before her. And I think that character in a woman makes you a person who will drive the nation to the utmost, to the end, to ensure we reach our goals. So I feel I'm different because of my determinations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta Pereira, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka. We, of course, as the show progresses, we will discuss more about your policies and what you can bring to the table as far as politics, diplomacy, as far as economics are concerned. We'll talk to you shortly. Let's now talk to Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, independent presidential candidate. Professor Vijayasinghe, we've seen in the past you've supported candidates. You've supported Maithripala Sirisena's candidature. You've supported Mahinda Rajapaksa's candidature. You've supported presidential candidates before, but why this time contesting independently? What was the reason behind this?
Well, if you look at the people I supported, you will find the answer, that you trust people to a great extent and then they let you down badly. Mahinda Rajapaksa, whom I voted for in 2005, did an admirable job in his first term. But when he won the presidency a second time, because I think of this large majority, because of the animosity generated by, I think, insidious support for his opponent, he went into a shell, and I'm afraid the last 2 or 3 years were not as successful as previously. And as I told him in 2014, I could not support him if he did not fulfill his promises. Therefore, I supported President Sirisena, and President Sirisena did even more appallingly in that he broke his promises from day one. Now, whether he was wholly responsible from the start or whether the strange coalition he listened to, Ranil Wickremesinghe and Chandrika Kumaratunga, destroyed him, I won't go into now. But nothing was done. So in a sense, one needs to put forward one's ideas oneself without allowing them to be perverted. And I think it's particularly important that we get a change from the current political culture. I'm very pleased to be on the program today with your two other guests. I'm only sorry that only one of them is a presidential candidate, because the other would have been an admirable candidate too. And I think our position would be very simply, it is important for people to vote. I hope people will put me first, but if they don't put me first, then they will put one of the other intelligent, thinking, independent candidates first, and only give a second preference to someone from the two major parties who is likely to win, because the message must go to them that they must work for the whole country, not only for their parties, not only for their friends, not only for their relations. Now, the principles and policies I'm putting forward, I hope we'll have a chance to look at them later, but there's one thing that I would like to make clear, that one of the curses of the 20th century was the professional politician, people who had done nothing in life except politics. And I think you need to look at people who are suitable for jobs, suitable because of their qualifications, like my colleagues here as well. And one of the things I tried to do, I was on National Human Resources Development Council, I did a paper about the need, whenever anyone is appointed by politicians, they must put a reason in writing. And for the more important positions, there must be a screening process by people who are non-political.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jaisingh, independent presidential candidate. We, of course, will speak to you also about the policies that you're bringing to the table, and also why, from the 35 presidential candidates who are vying for the top job in Sri Lanka, why would people vote you in? And why must they use their first preference to vote an individual of your stature? We now move our attention to Krishmal Varanasuri, attorney at law, legal counsel for presidential candidate Mahesh Senanayake, who is contesting from the National People's Movement. Krishmal, interestingly, you are not a presidential candidate. We have two presidential candidates, but we thought we were going to give a platform to the alternative candidates to come out and speak about what they are doing. And hopefully next week we'll have Mahesh Senanayake himself to speak about his policies as well. But Krishmal, right now, the problem is Mahesh Senanayake's candidature came out on a very high note. People spoke about him, people spoke about the policies, people spoke about the change that Mahesh Senanayake would bring to the table. There was a lot of discussion about his candidature. But now, things are not looking that rosy for Mahesh Senanayake anymore. What is the reason behind this? We see public rallies being organized. We see he cannot garner much support at public rallies. We see the other two main presidential candidates, along with the JVP, being able to gather or garner a lot of support from the people for their public rallies. But Mahesh Senanayake seems to be somewhat lost in the equation now. What is the reason behind this?
Well, thank you, Shamir, for inviting us. I'm privileged to be seated with two prospective presidents of the country. I feel completely an underdog in the equation, but I'll try to do justice to the policy that I'm supporting. Shamir, the answer to your question lies in the question itself. You say it looks as if, it appears as if there is no garnering of support. That is the very thing that I would like your viewer to consider. How does it look to you? It looks to you on the media. How does it look to you? It looks to you when you look at the number of heads that have been escorted on buses for a packet of rice, quarter bottle of arak and 2,500 rupees a day to come and fill up those hordes and hordes of people, shouting, waving with flags given to them. Now, I would like to ask your viewer, who I hope I know mostly is an erudite viewer who will understand what I'm trying to say. Will at least 50% of those people actually vote for these people? I don't know. Even if you count all the number of heads before that stage, do you think that alone is sufficient to garner an electoral majority? I would say no. Because, Shamir, candidates like Senanayake, to whom I advise on certain matters, correction, he doesn't come from the NPM, he's coming from the National People's Party, the light bulb. NPM is just one concomitant group of civil society that have brought his candidature forward. In addition to that, there are people like us who don't belong to the NPM, who don't even belong to the NPP, but who are trying to usher an alternative to show the people that there is an alternative. What's the alternative? That's the question I'm trying to raise. You see, we are now being given media attention, if you look at the major channels, all channels, to 3 possible candidates. Out of them, I saw a recent WhatsApp message. Percentages, large percentages, chunks are given to 2 major candidates. A third one forming a little bit of a 14-12%. But all the other candidates like Professor Vijay Singh and my good friend here, I don't think they even get airtime on any of these channels. And then people look at that and say, well, you don't have support. But I challenge all these people. I challenge you, the viewer. If you want to reassert your sovereignty this time, are you going to be still governed by the number of heads that come to put their waves in front of stages, or the empty rhetoric that is uttered on stages, mudslinging at one another without actual policy, which we can discuss as we go forward? Or are you, at least after 71 years, going to assert your sovereign power now and say enough is enough? We've had enough of you professional politicians, as the good doctor referred to, people who live on politics, people whose salary is paid by politics, people whose pure survival depends on politics, people who you and I espouse, pay for, give our tax monies to live, and for their wife to go shopping also. Are you going to try and make a change this time? And I suggest that you don't look at the number of heads at a stage who have been paid to come there in buses, but look at your sovereign power and assert it this time. We can discuss it.
Thank you very much, Krishman Varanasuri, attorney at law, legal counsel for presidential candidate Mysore Lanka, contesting from the National People's Party. So onto my immediate right is Nadim Majid, onto my immediate left is Deshan Gonora, and onto my far left is Shehan Ranatunga. Let's start off tonight's show with Shehan.
Thank you, Shamir. I'd like to start with Dr. Ajanta Pereira. Doctor, you spoke about your background and the work you have done. Why is it that you decide to come forward as a candidate for this particular year? And I'm asking this question in the context of the fact that there are 35 candidates contesting for this election. So what is it about 2019 that made you decide to step forward?
Okay, that's a very good question. In fact, the very reason being, I have watched politics in Sri Lanka for a long time. I have been helping those who are in politics to make a change. I have helped them to develop policies for Sri Lanka. But one thing I have seen is that it has created the people who have been in the parliament for many, many years. They have literally done nothing for this country. I mean, if you really look at the situation, let's go to the statistics of Sri Lanka. 45% of the people of Sri Lanka are still living on the poverty line. And then we have 600,000 people are joining some of the movement still. Then when you look at the actual deaths of Sri Lanka, it's so huge, and how could a country reach such a huge debt? And every child who's born to this country every day is born with a debt. They are in debt to other nations. Almost 700 women leave Sri Lanka every day from Katunayake airport to find better pastures. And then when you really look at the situation, I mean, what is the economy that we have? We don't have a national growth. We don't have an economic growth in Sri Lanka. Since 1986 to 2019, our growth rate in economy has come down by 50%, the national economy. And then we are importing everything from outside. Okay, let me tell you exactly why I am joining the politics. I was in Fiji Islands as a professor for environmental science from 2013 to 2018. I returned to Sri Lanka in 2018, and what do I see? People fighting in the parliament, not being able to solve problems through discussions. Is that how a politician should behave? Is that what is expected of the parliament? Then in April, there is the bombing, and everybody is trying to put the blame on each other. I mean, nobody is taking responsibility for the death of 200 odd people or 300 odd people. They couldn't even figure out the numbers correct. And then they are blaming each other. And the president of the country is also giving reasons as to why it happened. The prime minister of the country is saying that he was not invited to the Security Council. Can people talk like that who are supposed to be in governance? And then the last resort was when the garbage that is from all the way from England is brought to Sri Lanka, they are kept hidden in the BOI yard. And then all of a sudden, after the bombing, it gets discovered there are garbage containers in the BOI yard.
Dr. Ajanta, let's talk about your visit overseas and what you did there. So, you left the country in which year?
2013, in September.
September, and you came back in the year 2018.
I came to Sri Lanka on and off. I mean, I was
but
working.
Someone might ask you, an individual who has not even been in Sri Lanka and who has not even been employed in the country for 5 long years, how can she come and dictate terms to us in terms
Very
of,
easy to answer.
In terms of taking the country forward?
All right. I got my PhD in 1992. I came back to Sri Lanka. I started a national program on recycling of solid waste. I spent 26 years in this country, or maybe if you calculate a little less. I walked down the streets of Sri Lanka and I was teaching people exactly what environment is. When I came to Sri Lanka, there was no knowledge of environment. And then I had to build it up to such an extent that people understood that we need to protect the environment even while we are developing. And that's called sustainable development.
Let's talk about, nothing, just a second. Let's talk about the incident in Muituramulla, the garbage issue that took place. What was your contribution like after the incident took place?
Basically, I have always told them the best solutions for
I'm not asking about what you've been stressing on, but I'm asking you, how were you actively involved after the Muituramulla incident took place, which claimed the lives of many individuals?
Yeah, the Muituramulla was never supposed to happen. And then what happened was basically it fell down because I actually tried to stop it from happening. That's the point. I tried to stop it from happening.
How so?
Even in 2013, before I left the island, there was a meeting in Muituramulla. There was a very big meeting in Muituramulla. And then I told them very specifically, stop dumping garbage on Muituramulla. It's going to slide, it's going to fall.
But you were not able to make an impact in the year 2013. You were not able to tell the ruling party or the ruling government at that time to shift the Muituramulla garbage dump. Now you're saying now you're vying for the top job in Sri Lanka. You're the candidate to become the president of the country, the 8th executive president of Sri Lanka. And people might ask you, where is action?
I developed the national policy for solid waste for Sri Lanka. I have laid down exactly how the solid waste should be handled in Sri Lanka. I handed it over to the present minister, Mr. Champika Ranawaka. I have actually showed him exactly how it should be handled. And the last option that I put in the policy was a landfill. When no other option is there, use a landfill so that only the waste that cannot be recycled, composted or biogas, use that for, as a residue only, you should use the landfill. What did he do? He got funding from outside to develop a landfill and he went in for that. So I have developed the policy, I have created awareness, I have worked with the local authorities, I have given my very best for them. But the decision making has always been in their power.
In your opinion, what are the most important issues that the country is facing right now? And in your opinion, what do you think should be done to address those issues?
All right.
The five main plaguing problems in Sri Lanka.
All right. Number one is the economic development. We do not have an economic development right now in the nation.
What is the economic growth right now, Dr. Ajanta?
At the moment, it's very low. And basically, what is really...
at present?
Sorry?
Where does it stand at present?
At the moment, it's about maybe about 10 to 15%.
It's 2.9%. Now,
all right.
Someone might ask you, a candidate who does not know the economic growth of Sri Lanka, how can she govern the country?
I knew it was 3%, but I just wanted to be roughly, thinking at least giving a little chance for the other side.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
So economic development is number one.
All right.
What are the other four issues?
The ethnic issue.
Excuse me?
Ethnic issue.
Ethnic issue. Number three?
Number 3 would be basically education.
Number 4?
And the women's rights.
Number 5?
Number 5 would be basically, infrastructure for the country.
Where does foreign direct investment stand in this equation?
Where does the?
Foreign direct investment stand in this equation?
In my view, the foreign investment should come only once we know exactly how our development has happened. We do not have data on the development process that has happened. We do not know exactly where the development is happening because the development has been very haphazard because it's been brought from outside.
Dr. Ajahn, the data with regard to development can be obtained by the central bank annual report. Which
Yeah, I know. But the thing is, most of that data even cannot be trusted because what really basically I'm looking at is, if you look at the whole country on the whole, where does the development actually takes place? Is it a needed development or a haphazard development?
We'll come back to you in a minute, Dr. Ajahn. I want to drag my attention to Professor Ajay Vijay Singh as well. Professor, in your opinion, what are the top 5 issues that needs to be addressed immediately in Sri Lanka?
Well, let me start by saying that the issue is the question of governance, and that is why I think it's very important to do structural reforms.
Right.
Now, that question of governance then branches off into some of the other areas.
Professor Jason, shall we speak about the 5 main important points first, and then you can elaborate a little bit?
Shamir, I'm afraid I approach things logically. I just don't pick 5 things off the top of my head when
so
someone
let's
asks
talk
me a
about
question.
governance first.
I'm talking to you about the Constitution, which I hope you've read, I put.
Right.
And the reason I say governance is vital is because one of the biggest problems with regard to economic development, which is also very vital, is the lack of confidence in this country. Why is there a lack of confidence? One, because of the corruption. That has, and that springs from total failure of governance. Second, because of the lack of personnel to direct development in its various forms, because the wrong people are in the wrong jobs, they are put in for the wrong reasons. So that is why governance also leads to a decline in economic development.
Right.
Then the failure of governance to give people proper roles, consultation, is why we continue to have this massive ethnic problem, because a lot of people feel that decisions are made without any reference to them, decisions that affect them. This particularly affects the north and the east of this country, but it also affects a lot of the rural areas where no one takes any notice of the people. And that is why I think structural changes to ensure more consultation and more decision-making from the grassroots up is vital.
Right. Okay.
4, the lack of governance actually affects, I'm actually taking up some of the points that Dr. Ajanta made, which I agree with, but I'm putting them in terms of a structure which I hope you will appreciate instead of just popping questions at one. Education. The whole educational system is a disaster because there is no sense of what is the purpose of education, what are the skills that are needed. And finally, and this is one of the most important features of my constitution that I've drafted, governance must work in terms of directive principles. What is the role of the state? What should they be aiming at? Now, at the moment, you have things like very good things in the directive principles, and then the last clause in that particular chapter says none of these are justiciable. They're pie in the sky. No one can go to court and say, you're not giving a proper education, you're destroying the environment. All those things about a decent environment, not detailed enough, I put in more details, but things like the environment are in the directive principles. And then there's this ridiculous clause saying, well, actually don't bother about these, don't think about them. So I made them justiciable.
We have got over it.
But the Constitution must say specifically that they are justiciable and what is the penalty. Because if a government is not doing its duty by the people, so that is why I've started with the question of governance. Don't forget this Yahapal in a bunch of shysters came in claiming that they wanted reforms in good governance, and they did nothing of the sort. They made things worse. Now, my view is that you cannot trust people to be good or decent or nice. There are people who say, poor President Sirisena, he's very well-meaning, he just doesn't know what's going on. I think you have to put it in the Constitution rigidly, and that is why this new Constitution they put in, there are 16 pages of very clear changes. Again, one example I give you is when I was looking at the parliamentary debates on a new Constitution, they talk about the judiciary. All they talk about is the independence of judges. Now, all that is very good. I'm not saying judges shouldn't be independent. Of course they should be. But what do ordinary people think of about justice? What are the reforms they want? They want justice to be inexpensive. They want it to be quick. They want people in remand, especially young people, to be looked after. So all those I have included in terms of rules, and I've dictated to the people who make our decisions the lines of principle on which they should act.
Thank you very much. So I want to pose the same question to Krishmal as well. Krishmal, in your opinion, you're the legal counsel for Maher Naik, who's contesting under the National People's Party. In your opinion, what do you think should be addressed immediately in Sri Lanka if, hypothetically, let's say, Maher Naik is elected president?
Thank you, Shamir. I like the way you put that across. Over the years, since we've also returned to the country, we've been advising several, including heads of state, but sometimes advice is not taken. So when you invited me, I put down a small list, Shamir.
Yeah.
My list actually revolves around, I'm a lawyer, I look at things from a constitutional point of view. I believe there are people have not been given the entire benefit of their sovereign power. Why do I say that? Their sovereign power is held absolutely by the people. Article 3 of the Constitution. Then we give it in public trust to 3 institutions to work for us. Our servants. We pay them salaries to do that. Executive office. We elect the executive president who with a cabinet makes executive decisions for us. Are they doing it for you? Or when you see them running up and down in the night trying to muster their crowd so that they can have parliamentary power, are they working for themselves? You decide. Legislative power. We give it to 225 persons who we assume have got enough knowledge and intellect to go and make laws for you. Are they making laws for you or hitting each other across the face with a slipper for 5 years and then looking after their pensions after 5 years? You decide. Judicial power, the institution I belong to. Are you having access to justice? Do you have your cases decided quickly? When you go to a courtroom, are you sure that your case will be heard that day? Or some people who have millions to afford top counsel getting their job done. And if you can't afford such top counsel, unfortunately, we also belong to some of these crowds. People think that we are also sharks. But are you getting your access to justice? So if all 3 sovereign powers are not working for you, then Shamir, would you give me 30 seconds just to run through some questions?
Yes, very quickly, yeah.
Now, for example, our economy, the good lady referred to a different figure, but you're right. It's something about 2.6% growth, which we are the lowest in South Asia, right? Now, one of our erudite economists say that our growth is depicted in the number of ladies wearing heels and going to salons. Then we have about 21% of our land area at the moment being utilized, and I think we are not even producing, the rough calculation that I saw, at least about 7% of our domestic requirement here. So 93% we are depending on importation. What are we doing? If you look at our presidential system, people speak of changing a presidential system. Where are you going to put your executive power? People need to decide that. Agriculture. Now, I can see both main candidates from stages trying to push free manure. Now, earlier it was subsidy. Now they are going to give it free. But are we still not giving the fish but not the rod? Have you thought of making professional agricultural farmers? Our main problem with agriculture is not that people don't have manure. The main problem is that our cost of production is too high, they can't earn a profit, and therefore we can't sell it at competitive rates. We need to think of making professional farmers, thus giving them education, those who live on the land, toil the land, and work on the land, thus reducing the cost of production. I can go on and on education, on foreign policy, on transport, on health. I hope you all will give me time, because this is the only time that people like us have to push an alternative to the people. We don't have the millions to go on stages and shout like you said. So if I'm given some time, I will tell the people what our policy alternatives are.
Professor Vijay Singh, UNICEF, I believe last week, shared a policy brief with all of the presidential candidates. And there was a very striking observation that was made there. They'd put 6 problems facing the children of Sri Lanka, and in one of those was that Sri Lanka is ranked among the 10 worst countries in the world for childhood malnourishment. And in fact, Sri Lanka actually ranks below Afghanistan in this respect when it comes to childhood malnourishment. Sri Lanka was just, I think a month or so ago, promoted to the status of being an upper middle income country. Do you feel that on your platform as a candidate that you're doing enough to address the inequalities that are so obviously prevalent in our society?
Well, I'm very glad you brought up that UNICEF report, because I just saw it today, and they claim they wrote to all the candidates. They didn't write to me. I think they obviously think in terms of what they call important candidates. I don't know who they're important. I think it's disgraceful on the part of UNICEF to make false claims. I wrote them a letter, to which I sent them an email, to which I didn't get a reply yet, so much for UNICEF. And one of the things that irritates me very much is they seem to be like Sri Lanka in forgetting records, because the last communication I had from UNICEF was the head of UNICEF, with whom I worked very closely on pushing the National Human Rights Action Plan, the previous one, when I coordinated the task force, Una Macaulay, who sadly died suddenly. And my last email to her was, what are you doing about the people under arrest at Gintuta? Because I said a lot of people were taken into custody and kept there without any rhyme or reason, not even their cases not brought to court properly. And her answer was, I'll put it to the task force and let you know. She was beginning to sound like Sri Lankan politicians.
But on the issue of the inequalities themselves.
Let me finish. I wrote back to them saying, why don't you attend I'm having a seminar day after tomorrow on rights in memory of Bishop Lakshman Wickramasinghe, who was chairman of the civil rights movement. And I have it in 3 parts. One is about bringing justice to the people. The second is about women. Justice Shirani Tilakawardena, who was one of our best justices, is actually going to talk about women and what should be done. And the third is Anuma Dissanayake, who was NCPA chairman, did a comprehensive job about improving children's rights, including things like nutrition. She noticed this factor that we were going down in this regard. And obviously, you need to have better expertise, but you also need, and I stressed this in my manifesto, that there must be greater decision-making and monitoring at grassroots level. Because you made the perfectly valid point, and so did Krishmal, that there are many people who think economic growth is because the people of Colombo wear high heels and go to nightclubs. And the inequality of this country is burgeoning. That is why I said that the state's duty to promote equity, which is should be justiciable. So issues like the one you brought up should now be justiciable. People and go and say the children of Monaragal have nothing. But during my experience in a lot of the Pradesh secretariats, you see there are a lot of staff there, they're not tasked with monitoring. I tried. The first circular I drafted for the Secretary Minister of Public Administration was sent out by Mr. Abekun. The second, which was going to set up protection. Protection includes things like the plight of children, the health situation, and we had very good midwives and people who monitor the health of children afterwards, but it's not coordinated. There's no checking on these. And I tried to get this committee set up. I drafted the circular for Abekun. He said, wait till after the election, and then he forgot all about it. But what you need is grassroots monitoring on this and immediate remedial action. One of the reasons that I'm working with the movement to unite the motherland, which has a wonderful plan for actually creating grassroots decision-making mechanisms. One of the reasons I want that to happen is Colombo can't decide, the provincial capital can't decide, they don't know the grassroots situation. It's things like education. Education has zones, and the zones cover a town plus a village area. So they say teachers are okay, all the teachers are in the towns. You need to have monitoring and remedial action at grassroots. So I've addressed that. But I fully agree that it needs greater involvement there, and that's what I specified.
Dr. Pereira, you said that you'd worked amongst the poorest of the poor. I think it's quite disgusting that we live in a country where on one end of the spectrum we have children who have obesity problems, in Colombo, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have children who are starving or who are stunted or wasting.
Yeah,
Die eating coaca.
I mean, you have infants who are dying because they're not getting the food that
well,
they need.
basically, the reason being, I think, if you really look at even within inside Colombo, now when I told you that I have worked among the poorest of the poor, it has been in places like Madampitia, basically in Blumendal, near Mitiramulla, you know, that's where the concentration of these children were. Basically, what was happening was those children, not only they were malnourished, they didn't even go to school. And I remember in the years that I have worked in those areas, many of the children went to the dump site to collect waste, paper, glass, and plastic, and they were providing the family with an income. And that's all they did in the morning. So what I had to do was I went to those areas and I collected those children, and in fact I set up a non-formal education unit at the Agamati Vidyalaya in Mitiramulla.
But Dr. Pereira, we have liberal economists, both in this country and overseas economists, who advise the policy direction of this country, who say that, you know, we're spending too much on welfare, that Sri Lanka is a welfare
I think
state.
basically
If we are a welfare state, how is it that all of these children, among the most vulnerable groups in our country, are falling through the social
it shows
safety net?
very well. I mean, one of the things that the most important things in a country is the monitoring process. The ministries, they say they spend a huge amount of money on social welfare. They say that, but who's monitoring it? I mean, in the budget plans, in the ministries, they would say in the lineup that we will be spending this much on this particular issue, maybe for women to have better jobs, children to have more education, children to have better food. They can write those things down and they can even go and dish it out. But at the end of the day, who is monitoring in this country regarding what is happening to the money
Whose
spent?
responsibility is it to monitor? Because we have close to 10% of the population works in the public sector. You'd imagine that there'd be enough people to go around to monitor the
there are a lot of graduates,
the family health officers.
There are a lot of graduates who are coming out of the universities. There are a lot of cadre vacancies in the ministries. Most of the time, what would happen is the minister would bring his family, his relatives, into the ministries, and they give them jobs. But there are a lot of good people who are not given that opportunity. And then another thing I'm saying is, now even if you have a ministry.
How can you, sorry, I just want to, because, you know, we're short on time as well, but I mean, Sri Lanka, we have like serious debt issues as well, as you mentioned correctly at the beginning. How do we address these problems with our welfare systems? Because you mentioned, for example, Samruddhi, and about 600,000 people joining Samruddhi. Then you have state-owned enterprises like Sri Lankan Airlines, where the losses are in excess of the nation's largest welfare program, which is Samruddhi. And you have one candidate talking about reintroducing Janasavya along with Samruddhi. These are all costs. How can we balance out? Would you, for example, take a very controversial step and liquidate Sri Lankan Airlines in order to
basically, it's getting your priorities right. Taking care of the debt is a very important issue in Sri Lanka. For that, of course, we have killed our own industries. I can give you an example of the paper company, which would have given us a huge profits in this country from Valachina and Ambilipitiya. What did they do? They killed the industry. I remember Mr. G.L. Pires, I can't remember the exact year, he reduced the taxes for the paper that was coming from abroad. And so even though we had a very good production, people started buying what was coming from outside. And then they were making exercise books for the schools in our own country. They were recycling. That all got stopped. And eventually people became dependent on the paper that came from outside. So what I'm trying to say is, we need to rejuvenate, we need to restart these things. So that is one part of the economic development process. But the social welfare is a need in the country. So there are a lot of grassroots organizations, there are a lot of NGOs who can get involved. For example, I as an individual...
Dr. Pereira, very quickly, because time constraint prevents us from going into too many specifics.
Sure. But all
when we're talking about ideology, when we talk about ideology, a general criticism when it comes to socialists, and I'm asking this because you are that you are the candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka. A general criticism when it comes to socialists is that they'll tell you what they're going to spend money on, but they have no idea where they're going to get the money from.
The reason why I'm saying is now I as an individual, I was not part of the government. I was just a voluntary worker, and I developed that unit in Nagamati Vidyalaya, and today those children are coming out after passing their A-level. So what you need to do is, it's very, very important that this country allows people who are interested in doing welfare work to be also part and parcel of it. Now I know if you have a Ministry of Social Services, you have a limited budget. And you have a definite plan as to how you are going to spend the money. And whatever is outside of your scope, you need to get the NGOs involved, you need to get the private sector involved. But they, you know, when they come forward, you need to give them a helping hand by assisting them on your policies, telling them exactly how it could be
Krishna,
done.
we're speaking
so
about-
it's just getting the people involved in the process.
Mr. Varnasurya, when talking about like the National People's Party, I think we're expecting to see the manifesto of the National People's Party, not your manifesto
25th.
per se, but the manifesto of the NPP on the 25th, you said. What shape and form will this manifesto take, especially when it comes to these issues like welfare, like, you know, improving the strength of the social safety net to ensure that, you know, there's no child left behind? And what has been or will be your contribution to this manifesto?
Well, I think it's not fair for me to comment on the manifesto that's going to come out on 25th. Nadeem, sorry, Shamini, next
Sorry.
time. No,
Have
but
you had
no,
a contribution?
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, so because it's a political party, and, you know, I'm a very little fish in this whole fiasco. I will contribute in the areas that, perhaps in the areas of law, justice, and foreign policy, but once again, whether that will be taken on board or not would be a question. But my contribution to your question is this: as a country, we need to look at. I think we need to approach this question, Nadeem, from a different perspective, not as to how do we find the money for social welfare. How do we reform? You see, my approach and my contribution indeed to what Mahesh, if we work together continuously, which I hope will happen, because I must say this just for clarification, my end result or my involvement in the campaign of Mahesh as an advisor to him is not only to make him president. I did, it will happen, it will be good. But I hope that we start a process in which the people of this country are given a genuine alternative, an alternative to free-for-all politics. And so I hope that we will go on further to next year, even a general election, where people will gather around policy-based alternatives. Now, from that perspective, Nadeem, I say social welfare itself should be discouraged. Why do I say that? Countries like Australia, England, and America, which had large social welfare schemes, as you know, we call it the dole. People who didn't go to work, they sat at home and ate and drank on the dole and got themselves fat and obese. They have reformed these systems. There is always something attached to social welfare. You need to show that you are actively seeking work. You need to show that you're gainfully employing yourself in the economy of the country. I think we should get beyond this mentality of Samurdhi or Janasavi or Gamperali or whatever, of giving fish but not the fishing rod. We like this is a vicious cycle that we need to break, Nadeem, and that's going to be my contribution, if at all I'm allowed to contribute. We have to break this mentality where politicians will never break this, because they know as long as I can give Samurdhi every month to these people, they need to come back to me, cheer me at the stage, and come put hurrahs for me when I come to their village. But can I finish? Yeah. If I give them a way of making money, if I find a way where they live, they don't need Samurdhi anymore, they are not going to be politically subservient to me. That's the alternative we need. So I say there has to be a two-pronged attack. One, we need to look at development alternatives for the country. At the same time, we need to look at a reformist alternative. How do we reform our system? Not give hand-to-mouth mentality so that they get the Samurdhi and they go home, sleep at 11 in the night and not get up in the morning, again running to work at 4, while others who are depending on their tax monies run around the globe enjoying themselves. We need to bring equality in distribution of wealth in this country.
Mr. Varnasurya, on that subject, I think I might strike a nerve because you were also a former employee of the national carrier.
In my university days.
When it was in its Lanka days, before it became Sri Lanka.
And Sri Lanka. Little bit Sri Lankan.
Little bit Sri Lankan, yeah, it's okay. So I just mentioned to Dr. Pereira as well that currently, or at least as of last year, statistics as of last year show that the losses incurred by Sri Lankan Airlines exceed the amount that the government spends on Samruddhi, which is the biggest social welfare program. When you are in that kind of situation, can you justify cuts to social welfare? Or should you be, when you mentioned reform, should you really be looking at cutting your losses with an entity like Sri Lankan Airlines?
Yeah, but I once again, my answer to you is the losses, Nadeem, are not because the airline is making losses. I served that airline proudly when we only had 4 aeroplanes to run around the world, to go to 56 cities in 43 countries, and we still held that lion flag high. And there was one chairman, I won't mention names, who in the midst of all those losses came only for a few months. You know that he showed profit. For the first time in my 10-year career as a crew member flying around the world, I got 2 bonuses. How can one man show profit within a space of 1 year and everyone else lose? I'll tell you why. The airline makes money, Nadeem. There are so many holes in that bucket which we need to plug. You can't bring your classmates from overseas and put them on board of directors and tell them to run an airline when they don't know anything about running an airline. You can't put your chums to manage this department and that department, tell them to do marketing and make airline money. If you are, I still have 743 shares of that airline. When I retired, they gave me a golden handshake. I never sold those shares because I still believe that airline can function properly. Put the right people there and plug the gaps.
Ladybug, weekdays 4 p.m.
Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the third round. Let's speak to Deshan. You can pose questions from either Krishmal, Dr. Pereira, or Professor Vijay. We'll start off the third round with you.
Thank you, Shamir. I think I'll start off with Dr. Pereira. Dr. Pereira, you mentioned a number of issues that are, in your eyes, pertinent and that should take priority in the development agenda. Now, you come from the Socialist Party, am I correct?
Yes.
Does that mean your economic view is also based on a socialist viewpoint?
Yes, basically it's a very good thing because basically the government should be taking care of the people.
Correct.
So the main emphasis is on the local industries.
Right.
And that's exactly what is not happening in the country.
But I want to ask you a question, and I will pose this to Professor Vijay Singha after because he's been in government as well. Can Sri Lanka afford to be socialist?
Yes, of course it can afford to be. In the sense, right now, if you really look at the country, we already say that the growth rate is only 3%, which
Correct.
means the local industries have not been given the opportunity to come up. Now, even if you look at the BOI, the Board of Investment, most of the industries in the industrial zones are really foreign invested industries.
Will any entity be willing to come and invest, be local or foreign, if they are not going to be able to extract profits that are to some degree at least representative of the capital they invest? Do you think it's practically feasible when the whole world is having a balance or let's say a mixed economy that Sri Lanka has a future as a socialist country?
If you look at the agriculture, can I answer the question first? Basically, if you look at the agricultural sector, or let's look at the things that we are actually exporting. What are we producing? We are really depending on the tea, rubber, coconut, and so on, the light industries, right? But we have not touched on the agricultural industry because basically we are producing lots of vegetables and fruits where the farmers are involved. And now we have the opportunity to process it and export it. And there's a huge market out there.
Right.
But the farmers are not being given the technology in order to do that. Now, if, basically if you connect the universities where the knowledge is there,
Right.
and you connect it to the farmers, now what will happen is the farmers will gain a tremendous amount from the knowledge that comes from the universities, and they will be able to process these things, they will be able to harvest at the right time, process it, and make it into a huge industry. This is not really happening. And in the socialist movement, what we talk about is also the rights of the workers. Now today, if you really look at Sri Lanka, even if you look at the constitution, whether you look at the policies, the voice of the people is not taken into action. I mean, the farmers are not involved in the policy making, the fishermen are not involved in the policy making, even the garment factory women, they are not involved in the policy making. But the policies are made from top down rather than from the grassroots level.
Where does, see, the free market plays a massive role in how economics functions worldwide. In a socialist Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka led by you and with this vision where, regulation is done by the community, etc., by the authorities, what role does the free market play?
Let's look at, you see, Sri Lanka as a country, if you really take it right now, because that's where we are actually standing up for the presidency. Now, Sri Lanka has to set its priorities. The most important thing in Sri Lanka right now is to enhance its growth. And in terms of how much earning can we do?
Right.
Now, for that, the number one priority would be is to allow people to be able to generate an income within inside the country. Before we actually look at outside, we need to think about development within inside. This becomes a priority. Because until and unless the people become very strong and stable in their ability to earn and to be able to afford things which are from this country. Now,
before I go to Professor Vijay Singh, just two quick questions. So, under Dr. Pereira potential presidency, FDI will not be given priority. It will be more about agriculture and organic growth from within the country, correct?
Yes, we will definitely, but the foreign investments will come. As I said, I think I was interrupted last time. It's basically what we need to do is to look at how the development, the economic development has happened in the country. There are many areas where the national, the locals can take part in the growth process, but where there is technological hitches, where we need to bring the technology into the country, where we do not have that, that kind of industry, that kind of partnership should really
What's an industry like that, apart from agriculture?
Sorry?
Apart from agriculture, what are the other industries you're looking at?
There are many other industries. Right. Let's take, for example, textile industries, the garment industries. All these things need to take off, because basically what is really happening right now in the country is we have not enhanced our own industry. I mean, even if you look at the agricultural sector, we have a tremendous amount of work we can do. Now, let's look at even the waste management sector. There's a lot of economic growth that can happen within inside the country, even by developing those industries.
Dr. Pereira, just give me a second. I want to pose a question to Dr. Pereira about the agriculture industry and making Sri Lanka self-sufficient and having to export agricultural produce like vegetables and so on and so forth. How practical is this, Dr. Pereira? Because right now we've reduced the import tax of dried chilies to ₹5. 1 kg of imported fish would be reduced by 25 rupees. Import taxation I'm talking about. Permission granted to import chicken and eggs. And you're saying that let's export vegetables in Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
Sri Lanka is not even made
simple stuff. Because why do you have to bring down the tax? You increase the tax, so you discourage importation.
But if we do not have the capability of producing for our own citizens,
who is saying that? Why do you say that? This country has the ability to increase its growth of fruits and vegetables. We have the technology. We have the ability to do that. But basically what is
saying
happening
we
is
have the
the
technology
people are
and we have the
not, they're discouraged by the very fact that most of the things are imported. You see, we need to encourage our farmers, and the farmers are not stupid. Once they are given the knowledge from those who know about it. Let's take, for example, I have done my PhD on pesticides. And now, you know, the farmers are not even given that knowledge in most of the places exactly how they should be using these pesticides. And then we can always go for organic farming. But you know, it needs a working together. The intellectuals at the university level needs to work with the farmers. The intellectuals at the university level needs to work with the fishermen. The intellectuals at the university needs to work with the
So
industry.
you're saying a model like Basil Rajapaksa's Gramanagma project should be implemented in Sri Lanka?
I don't know about his policy, but what I'm saying basically is the linking between the knowledge and where the knowledge is needed will enhance the industry. And that's something we need to do.
If I may contribute 30 seconds to what she said on the same point,
yes.
but it's important. We are mostly agro-based economy. What she's trying to say is what I was trying to in very short times earlier. You see, we are now, who are farmers now? They're not people who stay on the land and toil. There are some middleman in Colombo who has some money to put a plot of land somewhere. He goes once a week and he's paying someone to plant on that land. Then you have a middleman, someone in Colombo who's trying to make a profit, a school teacher or a company man who's trying to be a farmer. What we ought to do, what she's trying to say is we have the ability, we have the land area. If you make a professional farmer, that doesn't mean someone who wears the amuda and gets on the field every day. The professional farmer who's given the know-how on how to do it, he stays on the land, he toils the land, he farms it, thus reducing the cost of production. You do that, he has an ability to make a profit out of his growth. Once that is enhanced, we will be then in a position to sell it overseas.
Exactly, and the youth. Today the youth would not want to be a farmer with the way it's been portrayed.
That's what
But if you give knowledge to those people and give
Technology.
you know, that's what socialism is all about. You respect the farmer, you respect the fisherman, you respect the worker. Give them some authority and knowledge and they will boost the economy. And it's not happening in Sri Lanka right now.
Dr. Professor Vijay Singha, you've been in governance for a long period. You've been out of governance for a short time as well. You've seen probably a lot of these ideas being discussed. How feasible is this model of just agro-based development and also potentially a system of governance that has socialism at its base?
Well, I think Vishal first to tell me that I have a lot of experience in government. It's true, I may give that impression, but I was actually in government only for a very short time. You also said we discussed ideas. You must be off your head if you think anyone in government talked about any ideas at all. They just pronounced. Ideas were taboo. Whenever you put forward an idea, you were accused of being an egghead. No, I think in a sense you need to look at it more holistically. Don't forget I'm not a socialist. I am a liberal, but I don't use the word liberal much because I think most people confuse liberal with neoliberal, which are business-based things. I'd prefer now to use the word liberal democrat. And the liberal democratic philosophy is very simple. It is obviously give priority to private enterprise and free markets, but, and this is what distinguishes us from capitalism, from conservatism, from the horrors of the United National Party as represented by Jaya Jayawardena, not Premadasa, who was a better man than Jaya and Ranil, is that you also have an obligation to look after the worst off in society. That is why we see ourselves as the middle of the road. And how do you do that? You do that by actually encouraging them to become producers themselves. You don't want dependency. So that is why I think the ideas put forward by my colleagues about developing our agricultural base in terms of better training, both for productivity, but also for marketing. And you know, we don't make enough use in this country of genuine cooperatives, you know, where you will actually pool skills. I think the idea that Ajanta had about the universities, I tried to do that in my month as State Minister of Education. I actually suggested to the universities that they each adopt an area. You know, it's very simple because we have regional universities and set them in competition to sort of help with the training, to help with the entrepreneurship, to help with the vocations, and also the marketing. Now, one of the features of our platform is the idea of a center in every divisional secretariat. And we will have 2 or 3 concepts of what those centers would be. One sort of social center where there'll be education, sports, entertainment, culture, but the other is an economic center. And we believe very strongly that every division should have a supermarket, which is a private-public partnership, but which will also enable people to bring their produce, because as you know now, if you go to our villagers and buy things off those poor boys and girls who still on the side of the road, it's 1/10 or even 1/50th of what you pay in Colombo. It's the middleman who profits. And one of our problems with especially the Jayawardena government, you read Ranil's defense of the attacks on the Tamils in 1983, when he talks about the poor Sinhalese businessmen like all his relations who he says the Bandaranaike nationalization defeated. All that is privileging the middleman and not the producer. And it is part of both socialism and of liberal democracy, that you privilege the producer to the work of the fruits of his labor by hand and by brain. Then, the other thing, though, that I think has to go hand in hand with better agriculture is an industrial policy. I mean, can you imagine the wickedness, and I use the word wicked, of both Basil Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe to make Rishad Badiuddin Minister of Industries? When I was chair of the TVC, we set up councils for the different subject areas. And we were trying to get them to tell us, so that our training would improve. Because, the Department of Technical Education continued with syllabi created 50 years ago and not looked at the employer to find out what they want. So we had a wonderful construction industry lot who wanted shorter courses, but with soft skills as well. We had a superb computer industry people. I worked together with the hotel school on tourism, where again the courses being taught by us were dreadful and the hotels did a much better job. But I'm happy to say the curricula that we finally created, the hotel said he's perfect. Then I got sacked and all those went to pieces because the minister came in who didn't know what he was doing. But on MESCO, we had a very good chairman and he said, I can do the service side of industry, but I can't talk for the producers because we have no industrial policy. And how can I say that we will need so many workers in this area and so many workers in that area? This country has no industrial policy. And we tried to get government to tell us at least what they were doing. Were they going to remove all taxes and allow free imports? Were they going to protect certain things? One of the things we've suggested, we have to work on it further. But there is absolutely no reason why this country can't produce things like bicycles, motorbikes, three-wheelers. But there has to be subsidies for those, and they must be produced not in Colombo, but out in the regions. And you have to do those in partnership with the universities who will produce the technology.
I just want to take my attention to Krishma. Krishma, now looking at the 2 candidates, you have Dr. Pereira, who has immense knowledge about waste management, education, so on and so forth. You have Professor Vijay Singh, who also has a lot of experience on education as well as a new constitution. Then you have yourself, knowing a lot about the rule of law, justice system, and so on and so forth. And then you have your candidate, Meister and Iger, knowing about the defense and so on and so forth. So don't you think it would have been ideal that all 3 candidates united and you all fielded one candidate as a good alternative, probably joining hands with the Janata Vimukti Peramuna as well, because they have a block vote of 500,000 to 750,000 votes. Why couldn't you all do that, Krishma?
Ideally, Shamir, if I were, I'm glad I'm not, if I were running for president, I have an education minister of my cabinet and environment minister of my cabinet seated next to me. But unfortunately, I'm not running for president. But all is not lost. Remember that in February or March, we are going to go to a general election. And I'm going to ask your viewer, watch these people. These are people that you want representing you who know their subject, who will know what policy is when they go in there. And if we create a force at this election, you show these so-called professional politicians that no, we are sick of you, we are looking at policy alternatives. We are looking at people who know what they're talking about. Then, come February, March, whoever this president is, if they can't run or give a bribe to the present parliament and make them run for the whole 5 years, you are going to go to a general election. Right. At that point, remember these people, and hopefully we can still make a better country.
Krishna, am I wrong to say that all candidates are driven by agendas?
All candidates will have political agendas, which is why I can speak with, I'm not a candidate. I have a people's agenda. That is, for the people of this country to start building a republic again. For the people of this country to know what building a republic is, that it's their sovereign power. You see, we are the democratic, socialist republic of Sri Lanka. Right?
You say political agendas.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase it.
Because
you think they have
politics
petty
is power,
agendas, petty political agendas?
No, petty or not, you must understand from a Machiavellian interpretation, politics is a pursuit of power. Anyone who comes into politics will have the ambition to garner power, state power. That's politics. We have to start there. We don't live in a utopian world where you think someone is going to come down and run for president and he's not going to have political agenda. Everyone has political agenda. But how do we as a people strategically use those political agendas to our benefit for the country? That's what people like us who don't contest are trying to utilize, pull strings if we can here and there, try to get the maximum for the people, because if we start building a republic, then people will start working in a system. Once a policy is put in place, they run on the track. Right now, we don't have policy.
As a civil rights activist, Krishna, I'm not asking you this question as the legal advisor to Mahisar Lanka, who's contesting under the National People's Party, but as a civil rights activist, don't you think it would have been better for all the independent candidates to unite and field one candidate, and that would have had a
would have been the
ideal.
Would have been the
ideal situation.
Would have been the ideal. But as I said, Shamir, would have been the ideal. But unfortunately, I think we did try. To be honest, several candidates, I don't mean Dr. Perera or Professor Vijay Singh, but I have been to an event where several of the candidates came, they all held hands, put them up and sang a song and all that. I was also there in the audience. But I think it didn't work. For whatever reason, it didn't work. But I
didn't see you on the stage.
No, I didn't. That's why I say I am not a candidate. I stay in the background, like the Godfather series, and try to pull strings. It's all about business. But what I'm trying to do is to get the best for the people. See, I am looking at all these candidates as potential, most of them, not all, most of them, as potential for the republic that I'm trying to build for the people. When I say me, people who think like me, those who are here, and people who are connected with us overseas. There are a large think tank, Shamir, I'm telling you right now, who are in touch with us, based globally, who want to build a better Sri Lanka. I can see some people in the present audience also, or some of the WhatsApp groups. I will not name them. But we are trying to build a better country. Now, all these minds, all these thoughts, all these visions, if we can harness them to, ideally I'm looking at 2020, right? And if we can get at least 12, 15, 20 good thinking people who don't need to live on politics to make a livelihood, who are already established in their own professions and careers, who actually come like the 50s and 40s when people came into politics to serve the nation. If we can find 10, 12, 15, 20 of those, I urge the Republic, I urge your viewer to think of that future, because not that long ago there was a man called Macron in France. He didn't come from a political party. He came, and immediately after he was made the president by those people, immediately thereafter there was a general election. Do you know more than 60% of that parliament were made of school teachers, corporate people, first-timers in politics. So this can be the start of a change for Sri Lanka, and I urge you to think along those lines.
Dr. Perera, you heard what Mr. Varnasurya had to say about upcoming general elections or parliamentary elections. Now, I know that in our conversation before the show, at least, the indication that I got is that at this presidential election, you are in it to win it, and that you will not, come D-Day, even be supporting another candidate. But thinking beyond the presidential election, if, unfortunately, you do not garner enough votes to become president of the country, are you planning a run for parliament? And if so, would you do so from one of the major parties?
I don't even want to think about the parliamentary election. Why should I think about the parliamentary election when I'm running for the presidential election? And I think it's very wrong even for the media to even say that none of the persons who are the candidates from the other parties could become the president, because what basically is 225 seated in the parliament, the other three people, let's say Andrew Kumara Dissanayake, they are good friends. I'm not saying anything bad about them. Sajid, again, even Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who has been very closely linked with the government, they've been given so much of time to do a change for this country. But, they have not been able to perform. And now, when we come for this election, all what we are saying is they have not performed, and we truly believe that we can make a difference. So all of us are running for this presidential election because we really want to see a change in this country. Because if we do not bring about a change, it will all go on in the same fashion, and after 5 years, we will all talk about how bad the country is. And we don't want to see that happen. We need to have a change.
If you take today, I think today it was the launch of the economic manifesto of the National People's Power that Mr. Andrew Kumara Dissanayake is representing as a presidential candidate. And when you're speaking about the economic manifesto, a lot of the ideas that he was talking about were echoed by you tonight on Face the Nation. And there is a parity, or there is a connect between the messages, and he is a socialist as well. When talking about on women's rights and on welfare and on agriculture, you both seem to be having very similar messages.
Yeah.
So are you? So is it? What is it that matters? Is it the victory of the ideology?
No, it's not what the person is talking about. Any person can even listen to me and say the same thing tomorrow. But what matters is the person. Is the person capable? Is the person capable of putting forward whatever they are saying that they would do? Is the person capable of performing it? Is the person capable of ensuring that what they are putting forward as their vision for the country, are they able to carry it out? This is what matters. And I believe, as a very educated person with a lot of international experiences, and I have been very committed for this country for a long, long time, and I know that I can perform it because of my background, because of what I have been able to achieve so far. So I am not Andrew Kumara Dissanayake. He might be saying the same thing. Maybe he has been listening to my programs. I'm not saying that. I'm just kidding about it. But, it's not about what people say. If you really look at Sri Lankan politics, people have been promising a wide range of things. In fact, I told the media that they should record it. And once they come to power, they don't perform. They only say things until they are elected. And then it changes. So what I can say right now is I am trusting in what I can perform rather than in what I'm saying, because the country needs it.
Yeah. One final question. You have less than 4 weeks to go, minus the 2-day moratorium on campaigning. You have less than, just over 3 weeks, let's say, to go for the election. What is your plan to get elected? How are you going to move forward with your campaign?
All right. It's basically one of the things that I would not do, I can promise you, is to pay people and ask them to come for my rallies and to show power. I would not do that. If you are the president of a country, you need to have honesty. Honesty, integrity, truth. These should be the key features of a president. I would not bluff. I would not show the wrong thing. But what I would do more than anything else is I would go to the people as much as I can. I would discuss with them. For example, in the northern sector, very critical issues are there. I would go and speak with them. I would go to the areas which are very critical, where the people need to hear as to what I am really giving them, and have discussions with them as much as possible. And of course, where I cannot reach them, I would use the media in order to tell them exactly what I stand for. So 4 weeks is a very short time, and I would urge the media to enable us to do that, because as I said earlier, Sri Lanka definitely needs a transformation.
I think, Dr. Perera, before I move to Shehan, I need to tell you that we are giving you an opportunity today on the show.
I know, and I thank you for
prior
that.
to the
I thank
D-Day. is simply because we place some sort of trust in the alternative candidates as well for them to perform and to make Sri Lanka better. So, Shehan?
Yes, Mr. Vansurya, you actually the name of Anukumar Dissanayake has come up quite a bit, and I just want to take something that he said and get your thoughts on this. He said that this election looks a lot like a case of who can be the best Santa Claus. And in light of what your initial statement, your opening statement, how does, after all, it's about winning the presidential election, I'm sure you agree. How does Mahesh Senanayake, as the alternative, counter this Santa Claus mentality of all these goodies being offered? What does he have to offer that would cause the voter to vote for him and not, say, the leading candidates who have all this airtime and all that you spoke about?
Valid question, Sharon, and I hope give me a bit of time to answer that. What Anura is saying is actually an alternative approach. Anura is also saying that because they also have about 4 plus the 2 nationalist seats in parliament, about 6, and they have never held government. So they can't also be Santa Clauses. So therefore, there is a similarity between what Anura may be saying and what other alternate candidates may be saying. And I agree with that. You see, because we have come to expect our presidents or prospective presidents to come on stage and say, you remember starting from our time, I can only remember from President Jayawardena. I'm sure the good doctor can go a few years before me. You know, they said I'll bring something from the moon and give, right? And there was another president who showed 2 coconut bears and said something. There were some other presidents who said, I'll bring the dove of peace. So people expect these dishes or goodie bags from the stage to say as to why I ought to vote you into power. We as alternate groups, number one, we have a different vision. I can only speak for the camp that I represent. What Mahesh brings to the people is that he has a team around him who know relatively well their subject areas. Mahesh has been very humble enough, I think, in that sense, in his inauguration at Sugatadasa to say, you ask me about economy and ask me how to bridge the budget deficit, I will not know it, but I have a person who can advise me, the former Auditor General. You ask me about law and legal reforms, I have someone to advise me on how to do that. Similarly, he has people, a team of professionals, mostly educated in this country, and some of us who have sought higher education overseas and come back to develop a country, got around Mahesh to build a different future. So we don't need to give goodie bags from the stage. What we can tell the people, your viewer, is that we will offer you a viable alternative, an educated response. Not, I'll give you 2,000 rupees a month for Samurdhi, I'll increase it to 5,000 by Gamperaliya. We can't promise that. Number one, because this is only presidential election, remember. He, even if I hope he'll be elected, if he's elected, he still has to run with this parliament for until, even if it's all in February, March.
Pushpa, very quickly. Let's take a look at President
Maithripala Sirisena. Just to finish that answer.
No, I will ask you this question. You can join it and then probably answer. I'll give you around 40-45 seconds to respond. Let's take a look at the appointment of President Maithripala Sirisena as the president of Sri Lanka on the 8th of January 2015. He surrounded himself with some intellectual people as well as advisors when he started off.
I was going to ask you.
No, but he had advisors. He had advisors.
All
but
of
then
them
the
have advisors.
The allegation was that he was not listening to his advisors.
Yeah, what's the that's the difference. So just to finish off, I'll come to.
Sorry, who are the intellectual advisors, if I might ask, on behalf of intellectuals?
I'll come back to you.
So the difference, very quickly, we don't have a Santa Claus goodie bag, but we have an educated response to your problems, and come on the 25th, look at our policy alternatives, and we can discuss that once the policy is out. One by one, we will tell you what our alternatives are. Answer to Shamir. Shamir, President Sirisena was a politician. Don't forget. So President Sirisena, although he may have, I agree with the doctor, I don't know who these bright chaps were around him who advised him, but even on the odd occasion that he may have asked some of us for advice, I say may have, that advice may not have been taken.
So how sure are you that Mahesh Senanayake will take
Because only he's not a politician. That's what I'm trying to say. Mahesh Senanayake is a professional, an educated engineering graduate, I think a double degree if I'm not mistaken, a professional right? And he knows how to work for a living. He's finished his tenure of service to the country, led the army of this country, and successfully at that. I have the highest regard for what he did in his profession. But that is not why we need to vote him in, not because he was army general. Because he's educated enough to know that I don't know everything. There are 4 kinds of people in this world, no, Shamir? Those who know and who don't know that they know. They are good. Those who don't know but don't know that they know. Then there are those who don't know but think that they know. Then there are those who know but actually don't know that they know. So now Mahesh is someone who agrees that he doesn't know everything. Not Siyalladat, not a Siddhat, right? He will understand that when others advise him who have gone the length and breadth of a certain profession, well, I need to listen to this man, evaluate it, see whether we can run this. And that's my answer, because he's not a politician. He has not been bred through this corrupt political system, and that is the hope I have. I mean, as someone said, he mentioned the JVP, 2015, we were saying, we can't actually give a guarantee to any party. You remember that, no? So I have only known Mahesh for the last 2 months or so. I can't give a guarantee. But from my little association with him, I see that he's a professional who's willing to listen. And that I can assure you.
Professor Jayasinghe, before we wrap up the first and second and third rounds, very quickly, Professor, the allegation leveled by many quarters from the 2 main political parties, that is the United National Party, the New Democratic Front, also the Sri Lanka Pojana Peramuna, which is also is being supported by the SLFP, is the fact that there are many candidates, independent candidates this time around, to break the votes of these 2 main candidates, that is Sajid Premadasa and Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Do you believe so?
Well, I think we have clear evidence of that. But let me just give you a holistic answer. Don't you think this country is quite mad? We had a wonderful speaker who declared that there were only 4 parties in parliament, which is why he locked up the leadership of the opposition with Mr. Sambandha. None of those 4 parties is contesting. Not the UPFA, not the UNP, not the TNA, not the JVP. All of them have come through surrogates. Is this an admission that their parties have all failed us? I think so. Secondly, I think Krishmal was perfectly right. Maithripal Sirisena had no intellectuals around him. I think there are about 3 of us who can claim to be intellectuals. We were not asked for anything. When I complained to him about some stupid nonsense he did, because Ranil and Chandrika told him. The 2 biggest failures this country has had in politics were his principal advisors. So please don't mention Maithripal Sirisena and intellectuals in the same breath. Now, I hope that Krishmal is right, that Mahesh will take intellectuals seriously. But one point I'd like to make is that because of this lack of professionalism in this country, my new constitution entrenches consultation. I start with a council of 9, and I do hope that some of my fellow candidates, even if none of us is elected president, and let me say, I'm surprised all these people, as you said, who wanted to run for president didn't come together earlier. I was a late entrant, so obviously no one asked me, not that anyone would have asked me anyway, I'm too independent for anybody. But I would like to suggest 2 things. One, that all our voters vote for one of the independent candidates.
The alternates.
One of us. I hope they vote for the brightest and best, and in fact the oldest. I think, as Krishmal rudely pointed out, I'm much older than all of them. But having said that, if they don't vote for me, I hope they vote for one of the others. And don't put the major parties first, because it's important for anyone who wins not to win with 50%, but to realize that they need other people in order to run the country. My second point is, and this takes up the point you made, I think what you said about there being surrogate candidates for one or the other, and in a very Sri Lankan sense, it's not that they are there to support A or B, they are there to do down B or A. We found that here, I think the last time I was on this program, when we had one candidate supposedly supporting, we had one person supposedly supporting one candidate, and I think your people were more pro that candidate than he was. He spent all his time denigrating one of the major candidates. It was disgraceful. But I think Krishmal and I benefited because we turned out so much better. So you're right, there are some people. But I think the country at large can recognize that while there are 2 major candidates, one of whom is likely to win, there are also about 6 other people who genuinely want an alternative. And I would like us to perhaps to get together and announce certain things on which we share our opinions. I do hope that the new constitution I've sent it, one of Mahesh Naka's people called me this morning, and I said, I'll send you the constitution. If he likes it, and Krishmal, I hope you as the legal person will advise him, I hope you can endorse it, I hope Ajanta can. I hope also there will be much more acquiescence in the idea that I have put forward, but on behalf of the movement to unite motherland, which is about the Samaraja, much more empowerment at the grassroots level, which I think we will all agree with, because you want consultation, you want much more decision-making powers.
Bottom up.
Bottom up. I think you want to get rid of the white elephant of provincial councils, not to abolish them, but to give them very clear, limited responsibilities and to have elections to them from the Pradesha Sabhas, so that A, we save a lot of money on the excessive elections, but B, we also make it clear that these people aren't being elected to be kings. They now think that because they spend so much money on getting elected, they are the kings. People are elected not to be kings, they are elected to be servants. So I hope these people elected indirectly will be servants. But the reason I want to entrench consultation, I have made it mandatory for there to be, for every ministry, a body of 9 advisors selected from applications, monitored to the Parliamentary High Post Committee, which is not the executive, and the chairs of those, who they would elect one chair, would serve on a second chamber together with representatives of provincial councils, so that you have 2 bits of expertise. And the Senate would also have to be people who have certain qualifications. I don't want to say they only have to be academic qualifications, because then only Ajanta and I would count. But it's not only academic that counts, it needs to be
certified albums. Power of country music, honestly, it's pretty amazing.
Selling more than 6.3 million tickets, making it the biggest North American tour in history.
You know now I'm not a man who's ever been insecure about the world I've been living in.
Legends of Music Refresh. Madata Ratri Dayata.
Less than 4 weeks to go for the D-Day, presidential elections 2019. We've invited 2 independent presidential candidates and also another individual who's an attorney at law who is representing an independent candidate as well at the upcoming presidential elections 2019. Let's start off the final round with Dr. Ajanta Pereira, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka. Dr. Pereira, you have 2 minutes. Tell the people why they should vote you in on the 16th of November 2019 and make you an executive president of Sri Lanka. Your time starts now.
Okay. Basically, there are many issues that have not been solved in this country. I specifically look at, I've already talked about the economy. I also want to look at the northern sector with regard to the ethnic issue in Sri Lanka, where the northern sector, the south and the east needs to be united if we are going to have economic development. And I propose very clearly that the people in the north should be given a substantial amount of power to decide for themselves, and I'm hoping to develop the city of Vaunia to be equal to Colombo, such that the development of northern sector can take place. Another change that I'm going to bring about in order to ensure there is ethnic harmony is that all the applications which are for positions in this country will not ask for the ethnicity or the religion. In that sense, it will only carry the name, and the ID card number needs to be given. So we will always function as Sri Lankans. No longer we will refer to each other on ethnicity, but we will always work as Sri Lankans. Why do I do that? Once we have peace in this country, there is harmony between the north, south, and the east. All will unite to develop this country. That becomes a priority. Then comes the people who are working in the estates. Today, the women who are working in the estates have done so much work for this country in order to develop the tea industry. But if you go to those estates, they have lived on those estates for 40 years. And there are many families who do not even have a toilet. Now this needs to be changed. And then when we go to the garment industry, where the women are working standing for 8 hours and they're earning only 21,000 rupees, these are 40,000 people almost, and they are living in the most atrocious, the horrible living conditions. All these need change. And there are many women who are leaving the country every day in order to find better jobs. And if you look at the education system, there are many buildings that are coming up for the schools, but what we need is quality education. The education needs to be not only on books, but on practicality, so that a child in this country will know exactly how to be a person who can contribute to the development of this country. This becomes very, very critical factors.
Thank you very much.
Now, as a woman, as a head of a family, as a mother, I know it's very important that we drive this country so that the people in this country feel happy to be Sri Lankans. We want to stop people from leaving, but stay in Sri Lanka and be proud Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajanta Perera, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka. We now move our attention to Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe, independent presidential candidate. Professor, why must the people vote you in? Your time starts now.
No, I don't think people must vote for me. I hope they will vote for me. For, I think, a number of reasons, because my main concept is to empower people, and I think I have an excellent track record in that respect. I think you need someone who is honest, who is intelligent, but creative intelligence, not a passive intelligence, and who is efficient. And I think in about 3 or 4 particulars, I have shown how to empower people. One cardinal factor in my constitution, which is in a sense my manifesto, is that I will want 3 official languages, not this nonsense of Sinhala being the official language, Tamil being an unofficial language, English being a linked language. Because people now need at least 2 languages to be empowered. And I have specified how we will insist that every child in this country gets 2 languages. They can then communicate with each other. And I've made it a directive principle that the state must provide teaching. And where there are no teachers, you actually have classes in the 3 months after O-levels when poor kids do nothing and are on the streets or else go to tuition to learn English and mathematics, because our mathematics teaching is also rubbish. And when people say we don't have enough teachers, I would say it's a disgrace that for 70 years we haven't produced enough English teachers and maths teachers for the country. And I've done it because I produced teachers through the university courses I started for people who didn't have English at A-level. I started producing teachers through the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission, and Univotech says that the teachers who got the diploma from our things were better than people who went to training college. But I also want vocational training. And I think I can be proud to say that I spent more money in my decentralized budget in the poorer parts of the north, Manta East, in Tunukai, than the Tamil politicians, because they were spending all their money for votes. I was spending money to create jobs. And it's very easy to start systems of training that will empower people. And then I also want to have, as I've told you, ways of making sure that intellectuals, professionals, retired civil servants have a role to play in advice and make it mandatory through the Constitution. So I do hope that people who care for the country, who care for development, who care for enhancing opportunities for the worst off, who care for equity, who care for communication with each other, a situation where all our children can talk to any other child in the country because they'll all have 2 languages in common. Those can be done, and I have shown that I can do it in all the work I've done in the public sector, in the private sector, through NGOs, through all my work, I think I have a very successful track record in empowering other people, and that is what counts.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe, independent presidential candidate. If you need to vote for Professor Jayasinghe, you need to search for the owl, symbol of the owl. Am I right, Professor?
The symbol of wisdom, and also, of course, old age, the wise older.
Thank you very much, Professor Jayasinghe, for your thoughts. And now move attention to Attorney at Law Krishmal Varanasuriya, Legal Counsel for General Maheshwara Naika, also representing the National People's Party. Krishmal,
yes,
the time starts now.
Thank you. The choice is very simple to you. If you are someone who thinks like I do and several others think, this is a time that you can show that you've had enough. To say enough is enough. 71 years, one side to the other. All politicians, have they served you? If you think they have, then go for their rallies, eat their rice packet, vote for them. If you think that it's time to at least make a voice heard, that you need to show that we are different, we don't want you anymore, we want an alternate, we want an educated response to our problems, then I say look at the light bulb, look at General Maheshwara Naika, who has a team around him, who can help him to at least get you on a start to that future, the pristine glory that this country belongs. Now, why do I say that? Look at the two top teams that are coming before you, as Shamir said when he started, with the hundreds of thousands of people flocking at the rallies. When you look around them, what is their team? Do you see any difference to what you've seen before? For example, let me give you a few quick, because my time is running out. What's going to be their foreign policy? With the Asian boom in China and India, are they going to continue with their non-aligned policy, or are they going to align themselves to China or India? Are they talking about it? Who's going to formulate that policy? What is the education? Our education now is, they say we are spending less than 6%. Even that we are spending on buildings. We are building buildings that can house 400 children, only 60 children in a classroom. Is that spending on education, or do we spend on education itself? Our transport, have any of them given you an alternative to a traffic problem? Or do you want to get stuck on the roads for the next 5 years also and spend 2 hours on the road, manpower, fuel, all that consumed, utter waste, where nothing happens productively to the country? Our health, do you want to have health ministers going to Singapore for their health, and then you are ending up going to a general hospital and running outside the general hospital to get your urine test done? If that's what you want, vote for the same politicians again. Finally, I tell you, if you want to make a change, that change may not happen in this presidential election. I am, in that sense, not a dreamer. But if you want to start making that change, think like us, think alternative. If you vote with the light bulb at General Maheshwara Naika and the team around him, we can start making our voice heard, and that will even allow the politicians who are on both sides. There may be some good people there who may want to join with us and make that future for Sri Lanka. Our time is lost, but at least for our children. You want to make that change? Let's start at this presidential election.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Krishmal Varanasuriya, for joining us this evening on the show. Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe, independent presidential candidate. If you are in the lookout for Professor Jayasinghe's symbol, that is the symbol of the owl. If you want to vote him in, that's what you should do on the 16th of November 2019. And Dr. Ajanta Perera, presidential candidate of the Socialist Party of Sri Lanka, will be contesting under the symbol of the balloon. If you want to vote her in,
always go higher.
And if you want to vote her in, you have to search for the symbol of the balloon. And if you want to vote in General Maheshwara Naika, representing the NPP, who's being represented today very well by Krishmal Varanasuriya, attorney at law, you have to look out for the light bulb.
Yep.
And I wish the two candidates all the very best for the 16th of November 2016. We are very unlikely to meet again on the show before the presidential election. Probably if one of you are elected the president of Sri Lanka, we probably will meet you again on this very show the week after. So thank you very much, gentlemen and the lady, for joining us this evening on the show. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Thank you very much, Deshan, and thank you very much, Shehan, for joining us tonight on the show. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It probably can start from Sri Lanka, It has happened across the world, elsewhere in the world as well. Probably on the 16th of November, you can show your might. Go out there and vote. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care and good night.